One of the things that I talk about in Creator Spirit is what the word flesh means as it's used in the Christian scriptures. The word is bazar in Hebrew, in the Old Testament, flesh, and sarx in Greek, in the New Testament. And this is not kind of cutting-edge work. This is something that scholars have recognized for decades and decades. But it's really helpful to recognize that flesh in the Bible does not equal skin or physical body. That flesh is humanity in its own strength, humanity on its own apart from the empowering presence of God's Spirit. And so there isn't necessarily anything wrong with flesh per se, but just relying on the flesh or putting one's hope in the flesh. The danger, I think, comes when English readers of the Bible just narrowly equate the biblical admonitions warning against the flesh, when they think of that just as warning against the physical or warning against kind of embodied life or everyday life. And they think that spirit means something other than our embodied life or something other than our everyday life. And I don't think that's the intention of the biblical authors at all. Rather, being people of the Spirit means being people who live from and by God's power, by the power of God's Spirit living in us. One of the things that impressed me as I was working on Creator Spirit was this Hebrew vision of human beings held in being moment by moment by God's breath. And this is something that's picked up on throughout the Christian tradition. Calvin talks about this a lot. That everything in creation being held in place moment by God's breath. And Psalm 104 says, if God should withdraw his breath for an instant, all things would return to dust. So none of us have life in ourselves. That's been an incredibly helpful and life-giving thought for me as I go through my day, as I go in to teach and feel tired and don't feel like teaching, to think that the source of life is present. God's Spirit is present, holding all things in being, and God longs for me to live from that life. God longs for me to live not from my flesh, but to breathe the breath of God and to live from that. So just that awareness of, the ubiquity, the universal presence and availability of God's Spirit, and that God's desire is for us to live from that breath moment by moment. That's been very helpful to me. It is something that I've talked about with my children, talked with them about that God is here with us now. I think about Moses' admonition to the Israelites, talk with your children as you walk on the way, as you go about your lives. I think that's one thing that I've tried to do more and more with our children is to, so as issues arise throughout the day, to say, well, let's ask God how we should respond in this situation. Or, yes, I know it's so frustrating when she says, that she won't share with you. Well, let's pray about that. Let's ask God for patience, or to speak to God kind of, I don't want to say casually, but spontaneously throughout the day in the course of the things we do.